I was rushing home from my great-aunt's funeral, my heart heavy with grief and a strange mix of urgency. I carried with me a letter I had kept secret for weeks, a surprise for my husband that I thought would bring joy after such a sad day. I imagined his smile, the way he always seemed to light up when I shared good news, and yet as I approached the door to our apartment, something inside me tensed without warning. I heard voices before I even reached the handle, familiar voices, his voice, deep and confident, laughing with someone else, and my stomach sank, my knees nearly buckled. The air seemed to shift around me. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to catch words, to understand, but understanding came too late. I realized he was speaking with his sister, yes, but the words were not trivial. They were plans, promises, secret arrangements. I felt an icy wave of sadness crash over me. Grief from the funeral mingled with the grief of betrayal. 7 years of marriage, years I had given myself fully, and here was proof that everything I believed, every smile, every promise, had been carefully hidden behind a mask. My heart pounded and my hands shook, not from anger yet, just from helplessness, because I had been carrying hope, a quiet hope that he would always honor our life, that trust meant something, and now it felt like the rug had been pulled from under me. I didn't knock, I didn't call his name, I just stood there, invisible and small, while the truth rolled out in casual conversation as if it were nothing. My mind raced, trying to process, trying to remind myself that grief had already weakened me, that loss was already heavy, but beneath the shock, beneath the fear, a faint spark appeared, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, I could still reclaim my life, that this moment of injustice did not have to define the rest of my days. I stepped back slowly, letting the door remain closed, letting patience grow inside me like a seed. I didn't yet know how, but I knew that this betrayal, this moment, would not go unanswered, and that in the silence of the next hours, the next days, I would begin a plan, not loud, not vengeful, but precise, measured, legal, something that would remind him and everyone watching that arrogance and secrecy can never outrun truth. And as I turned away from the door, my body still trembling, my mind racing, I made a silent promise to myself that I would endure, that I would act, that the quiet, patient justice I would craft would be more powerful than his careless confidence, and that by the time he realized it, the world would see not his triumph, but his own unraveling, all because I refused to let betrayal define me. And in that moment, as I walked away from the threshold that had once felt safe, I felt the tiniest flicker of control return, the first step in a long path that would ultimately restore what was mine, not through anger, but through calm persistence and unwavering attention to every detail he thought I hadn't noticed. After that moment by the door, the sadness settled into a quiet ache that followed me everywhere. I went inside later, slowly, carrying the letter I had meant to surprise him with, my hands still trembling. The apartment felt smaller, heavier, as if the walls themselves were aware of the betrayal that had just unfolded. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself to move carefully, to observe, to plan. Helplessness hovered like a shadow. I could not yet confront him, could not yet speak, because anger would be loud and uncontrolled, and I needed patience, the kind of patience that waits, that watches, that collects evidence without rushing. I sat at the kitchen table and listened, hearing snippets of conversation that confirmed what I had feared, secret accounts, hidden plans, his sister complicit in the quiet manipulation of our family. I felt a spark of hope flicker dimly, because even in betrayal there is the chance for justice if one moves wisely. Over the next days, I cataloged every piece of information I could gather, receipts, letters, odd phone calls, online records, everything that proved what was happening while I thought we were partners. Each discovery made the helplessness heavier but also sharpened my resolve. I realized that my calm observation was itself a form of strength, that endurance would be more powerful than confrontation, that silence, paired with strategy, could achieve what shouting could not. Weeks passed, the injustice continued, he moved through his days as if nothing had happened, arrogant, untouchable, his power felt unshakable, and yet in the quiet, I began to see cracks, missteps, the way people responded when they were not certain of his authority. I documented it all, patient, precise, careful, not out of malice, but because true justice requires accuracy. I did not yet celebrate, I did not yet act, I only prepared, every night reviewing my notes, planning my steps, imagining the moment when control would shift, when arrogance would meet consequence, and during this time, something extraordinary happened within me. The quiet hope grew into determination, the helplessness faded, replaced by clarity. I realized that the injustice done to me was not permanent, that patience and careful planning could transform it into something far stronger than revenge. They could restore my life, my dignity, my peace. Months passed. His confidence began to show subtle signs of fragility, small errors, whispered doubts from colleagues, the first signs that power built on arrogance is never absolute. And I stayed ready, not rushed, not emotional, only prepared for the right moment to act, a moment that would not come from anger, but from precision, from patience, from the quiet strength that only those who have endured true betrayal can cultivate. And in that growing calm, I began to feel something I hadn't in years, the sense that I was not merely a victim, but a person in control of her fate, and that knowledge, more than any confrontation, more than any shouting or pleading, would be the foundation of the justice to come. As the months turned into almost a year, I noticed the changes around him slowly, quietly, like cracks forming in a wall he believed to be unbreakable. His power, once absolute in our circle, began to waver. People hesitated, small mistakes became visible, partners no longer trusted him blindly, and I watched it all, steady, calm, knowing that my patience had already shifted the balance. I continued to prepare, gathering every last detail of his hidden dealings, every document, every transfer, every subtle manipulation he thought I would never see. It was tedious, exhausting work, but I carried it out without anger, with a quiet resolve, and in that process, I realized my own strength, the kind that comes not from shouting, but from enduring, from observing, from acting with care. He tried to assert control, sending messages, attempting to intimidate, reminding me of his influence, but I did not respond, I did not flinch, because the helplessness I had once felt had been replaced with a patient clarity. I no longer waited for mercy, I waited for consequence, and the day the first legal notice arrived, exposing the hidden accounts and manipulations, I felt no triumph, only a calm sense of inevitability. The law had its own pace, the documents spoke more clearly than any anger could, and each fine, each official record, each investigation confirmed what I had already known in my heart, that arrogance can only survive for so long when it hides from truth. He began to crumble, not loudly, at first, only in small gestures, a missed meeting, a call that went unanswered, whispers in the office, and I watched from a distance, not celebrating, not gloating, just observing, because justice, when it arrives after patient preparation, needs no applause. The world noticed too, and suddenly the man who had once seemed untouchable became cautious, hesitant. The influence he wielded now fractured by the quiet persistence of someone he underestimated. I moved carefully as well, reclaiming my life piece by piece, signing papers that restored what was rightfully mine, investing in projects I had dreamed of, setting boundaries I had ignored, and with each step, the sadness and helplessness that had once consumed me transformed into quiet power. By the time the court confirmed final judgments, compensations, and penalties, it was not a victory born of rage, but a triumph born of patience, observation, and enduring strength. I sat alone that evening, reading the final documents, sipping tea, feeling an unprecedented peace, because I knew I had acted not impulsively, not destructively, but with a precision that only comes from surviving betrayal and refusing to allow it to define you. The man who had once controlled my world now faced the consequences, and I had reclaimed not just material security, but the knowledge that my life, my dignity, and my freedom were intact, unshaken, and unassailable. And in that calm, I finally understood the power of enduring, patient justice. The final chapter unfolded not with noise, but with quiet certainty, a calm that I had built over months of observation, preparation, and careful action. One morning, months after the legal battles had concluded, I ran into him unexpectedly in a cafe near my office. He looked older, worn, shoulders slightly bent, the confidence that once dominated every room replaced by cautious movements and downcast eyes. He froze when he saw me, waiting for some reaction, perhaps blame, perhaps triumph, but I felt neither, only a steady neutrality. He attempted to speak, apologized again, This time without excuses, claiming that losing everything had taught him truths he had ignored, and for a brief moment I considered believing him, not because he had changed, but because consequences have a way of stripping illusions. I listened, nodded, and told him I hoped he would treat the next woman better than he treated me, not out of kindness, but because harm always circles back. He said nothing, only stared at his hands, and I left first, my heart steady, my steps calm. Outside the sun was low and warm, and in that quiet I realized the truth. My life no longer revolved around him, his actions, or his approval. A few days later I signed papers for a small business I had dreamed of for years, a venture I never dared start before because my energy had always gone to keeping another life afloat. Fear remained, but it no longer ruled me. The worst that could happen had already occurred, betrayal from someone I trusted deeply, and I had survived, stronger not through anger, but through endurance. Sometimes people online ask me how it felt to sell the house, to hear him screaming outside the gate, expecting a dramatic story, but the reality is quieter. The loudest moments pass quickly, and what stays is the silence afterward, the peace of choosing yourself without cruelty, without becoming the person who hurt you. That is the kind of justice no court can deliver. Now when I wake, I do not check my phone with dread. I do not brace for disrespect. I move through my days with a calm I once thought belonged only to other women, strong women, and if there is one certainty I have now, it is this: true power does not belong to the one who shouts the loudest or controls the most. It belongs to the one who can walk away with dignity intact, carrying their story not as a wound, but as proof that quiet strength always outlives arrogance. And in that understanding, I finally feel complete, free, and unshakable.